Imagine an exclusive club, a gilded fortress of wealth where Julian Thorne, the arrogant king of sharpshooters, reigns supreme. Into this opulent world steps Elara Vance, a figure of quiet grief, dismissed as an easy mark. But beneath her unassuming exterior lies a legacy forged by love and loss. The skills of a legendary seal husband, a promise she's determined to keep. When Thorne's mockery escalates into a high-stakes challenge, more than just pride is on the line. An unseen past collides with an arrogant present. This is the electrifying story of how one woman, armed with quiet strength and deadly precision, shattered an empire of arrogance, honored a profound love, and found her own undeniable voice. Prepare to witness how the underestimated can become unforgettable. The resonant crack of a perfect shot tore through the gilded silence of the Sterling Shooters Club, an auditory exclamation point immediately chased by a wave of appreciative applause from patrons clad in eye-wateringly expensive designer shooting gear. Julian Thorne, a man of 40 sculpted by privilege and success, lowered his custom rifle. A predator's smirk stretched across his perpetually tanned face as the distant target confirmed another flawless bullseye. This was his kingdom, an opulent fortress constructed from money, formidable power, and undeniable skill. A world that prided itself on its impenetrable barriers. If you've ever felt the sting of being underestimated, the cold shadow of invisibility, then what happened next? The moment that irrevocably altered this gilded landscape might just be for you. Near the grand entrance, Elara Vance, a woman of 33, stood as a quiet counterpoint. She clutched a worn leather purse, her simple navy dress and scuffed flats, an almost defiant anomaly amidst the sea of bespoke tailoring and gleaming equipment. She was a whisper in a room accustomed to declarations, easily overlooked. The receptionist, a young woman whose blonde hair and smile were polished to an almost artificial sheen, glanced up, her eyes cataloging and dismissing Elara in a single, practiced beat, as though she were merely a mote of dust caught in a sunbeam. "Excuse me." Elara's voice was soft, yet possessed an unexpected firmness. "I'd like to register for today's open practice session." The receptionist's gaze flickered up again, this time allowing a dismissive skim from Elara's sensible shoes to her unadorned ponytail. "Membership cards only," she replied, her tone a silken rebuff. Elara took a steadying breath, producing a creased envelope from her purse. "I have a day pass. It was a gift." From his vantage point across the expansive room, Julian Thorne, 5-time national champion, Olympic gold medalist, the celebrated face of a premium firearms line, had noticed the newcomer. His family's vast oil fortune had granted him access to the world's best training since boyhood. His innate talent had effortlessly done the rest. "Well, well," Julian's voice, rich and caring, boomed across the club, laced with an easy, condescending derision. "Looks like someone took a wrong turn on their way to the local thrift store." His companions, ever eager, erupted in sycophantic laughter, their amusement drawing yet more unwelcome attention to Elara, who was now making her way towards the basic range, her eyes fixed steadfastly on the floor. Ms. Evelyn Hayes, the club's capable manager and a formidable former competitive shooter herself, frowned sharply at Julian's comment, but chose to remain silent, a flicker of disapproval in her otherwise composed expression. Elara found a vacant spot at the far end of the basic range. She carefully placed her purse on the small shelf, and with practiced, economical movements, withdrew a cloth-wrapped package. She unfolded the material to reveal a standard Glock 17, serviceable, reliable, but utterly unremarkable compared to the gleaming, custom-engineered pieces wielded by the club's affluent members. Julian and his entourage had by now migrated closer, their interest piqued by the potential for some casual entertainment at Elara's expense. "50 says she can't even hit the target paper," one of his cronies joked, loud enough for Elara to hear. Julian scoffed, a sound of pure disdain. "Make it $5,000. I'll wager she's never properly held a firearm in her life." He sauntered over to Elara's station, his expensive Italian loafers silent on the polished floor. "Excuse me, ma'am," he began, his false politeness dripping with condescension. "Are you quite sure you're in the right place? This isn't exactly a knitting circle, you know." Elara finally looked up, her hazel eyes clear and surprisingly direct, meeting Julian's cool blue ones with a steadiness that momentarily threw him off his stride. "I'm just here to practice," she said quietly. He recovered quickly, his smirk returning. "Practice? Honey, this is a place for serious shooters. Tell you what, $5,000 says you can't hit the bullseye from 50 yards. Elara's expression remained neutral, but something unreadable flickered deep within her eyes. "I don't have that kind of money," she replied, her voice even. Julian's smile widened, sensing victory. "My treat, then. If, by some ridiculous miracle, you make the shot, I pay. If you miss, you leave this club and never return. Deal?" Ms. Hayes had approached during the exchange, concern evident on her face. "Mr. Thorne, perhaps we should allow our guest to practice in peace." Julian waved her off without a glance. "Stay out of this, Evelyn. We're just having a little friendly wager." Elara's gaze dropped to her left hand, where a simple, unadorned gold band encircled her ring finger. She twisted it once, a gesture so small, so fleeting, that only the most observant would have noticed. "All right," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Julian's eyebrows shot up in genuine surprise before his face settled into a triumphant smirk. "Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, we have ourselves a show." No one noticed the almost imperceptible change in Elara's posture as she picked up her Glock. Her spine seemed to straighten, her shoulders relaxing as they settled into a perfectly balanced stance. No one recognized the quiet expertise in her grip, the controlled, rhythmic pattern of her breathing, and certainly no one realized that the simple gold ring on her finger once belonged to Captain Marcus Vance, one of the most legendary snipers in SEAL Team 6 history, her late husband. 3 years earlier, Elara had stood under a stark gray April sky, the crisp, percussive snap of the Honor Guard's rifles cutting through the solemn silence of Arlington National Cemetery. The folded American flag pressed against her chest felt impossibly heavy as she watched Marcus's casket being lowered into the earth. Captain Marcus Vance, known among his peers as the Phantom for his almost supernatural skill, had served his country for 15 decorated years. The official report cited a helicopter crash during a classified mission. Elara knew, with a certainty that ached in her bones, that there were layers to Marcus's death that would remain redacted forever. They had met in Burlington, Vermont, Marcus visiting a fellow SEAL recovering from injuries. Elara, an accountant, her life as predictable as the spreadsheets she managed daily. Their chance meeting in a downtown coffee shop had stretched from polite apologies for a spilled latte into hours of captivating conversation. They married just 6 months later, in a small, intimate ceremony. Life as a SEAL's wife had taught Elara to live with absence, with gnawing uncertainty. Marcus would disappear for weeks, sometimes months, returning with new scars he wouldn't explain and haunting nightmares he couldn't share. "I wish I could tell you everything," he would say, his voice rough as he traced her cheekbone with a calloused thumb. "But I can tell you this. You're the reason I fight to come home." It was during one extended period stateside, after a harrowing mission had left Marcus with a torn ligament, that he first took Elara to a shooting range. "If I'm going to be away so much," he had explained, his hands gentle as he adjusted her stance, "I want to know you can protect yourself." What began as a purely practical safety measure soon evolved into something more profound. A shared activity, a silent language that gave Elara a precious glimpse into her enigmatic husband's world. Marcus, it turned out, was an incredibly patient instructor, and Elara, an unexpectedly gifted student. "You're a natural," he'd whispered, pride warming his voice, the first time she'd hit a bullseye. "You've got the three things that make a great shooter: steady hands, perfect vision, and the ability to stay calm under pressure." Over the next 3 years, whenever Marcus was home, they would practice together. He taught her everything: proper stance, breathing control, sight alignment, trigger discipline. "Shooting isn't about aggression," he would explain, his focus absolute. "It's about absolute control over your body, your breath, your fear." Elara absorbed every lesson, finding an unexpected peace in the focused ritual. Sergeant Dean Mac McKenna, one of Marcus's closest teammates, had once confided in her, "The captain never shuts up about your progress. Says you're a better natural shot than half the guys he's trained." The last time they went shooting together was just 2 days before he left for his final fatal mission. Marcus had been unusually quiet that day, more focused on watching Elara shoot than on his own practice. "Promise me something," he said, his voice husky against her ear. "Promise me you'll keep practicing, even when I'm not here." Elara had nodded, not understanding the true gravity behind his request. After the funeral, Elara couldn't bring herself to visit a range. Marcus's guns remained locked in their safe, untouched. She moved to Boston, hoping for a fresh start, taking a nondescript position at a corporate accounting firm where no one knew her as the widow of a fallen SEAL. Until last week, when a package arrived from Mac. Inside, a day passed to the Sterling Shooters Club and a handwritten note. "Marcus would want you to keep your promise. 3 years is long enough to grieve alone. Come back to the living, Elara." Now, standing in the opulent Sterling Shooters Club, with Julian Thorne's arrogant challenge hanging heavy in the air, Elara felt something stir within her, a spark of the person she had been before grief had hollowed her out. As she lifted the Glock, muscle memory, ingrained through countless hours with Marcus, took over. The world narrowed to 3 critical points: herself, the gun, and the distant target. Elara took a deep, calming breath, held it for a moment, then slowly exhaled halfway, and with infinite precision, squeezed the trigger. The shot rang out, crisp and clean, in the suddenly hushed range. Through the settling echo, the mechanical whir of the target retrieval system seemed unnaturally loud. Julian maintained his amused expression, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his features as he noted Elara's textbook stance. The paper target moved slowly, deliberately toward them, building suspense with each mechanical click. When it finally arrived, a perfect, solitary hole marked the dead center of the bullseye. The silence that followed was profound, a vacuum of sound where Julian and his entourage struggled to process what they were seeing. Elara calmly placed the Glock on the counter, her expression unchanged. Ms. Hayes was the first to speak, her professional mask slipping to reveal genuine admiration. "That was an exceptional shot, miss." "Vance," Elara supplied quietly. "Elara Vance." Ms. Hayes nodded, offering a smile that was both apologetic for Julian's behavior and deeply impressed. "Miss Vance, perhaps you'd like to try our advanced range facilities? Clearly you're no beginner." Before Elara could respond, Julian, snatching the target and examining it closely, interjected. "Beginner's luck," he finally declared, his voice carrying a sharp, dismissive edge. "Anyone can get lucky once." He turned to the rapidly growing crowd of spectators. "One lucky shot doesn't make her a pro. Let's see if she can do it again. This time, with real stakes. $50,000, Julian announced, pulling his checkbook from his jacket pocket with a flourish. "If you can hit 3 bullseyes in a row at 75 yards. If you miss even one, you publicly admit you cheated and leave this club." An uncomfortable murmur ran through the spectators. Senator Ashton placed a cautioning hand on Julian's shoulder. "Julian, perhaps this isn't the time." Julian shrugged off the touch. "What's the matter?" he taunted Elara. "Afraid your little trick won't work 3 times in a row?" Elara considered simply walking away. She had come today only because of her promise to Marcus not to engage in public spectacles. But something in Julian's dismissive arrogance, his blatant contempt, awakened a dormant fire within her. A sense of injustice not just for herself, but for everyone who had ever been underestimated or deliberately excluded. "I'll take your challenge," Elara said softly, her voice carrying a newfound resonance. "On one condition. If I win, the $50,000 goes to the Wounded Warriors Project." Julian hesitated only briefly before nodding, a sneer playing on his lips. "Fine. It's not like you'll win anyway." As Elara moved to the 75-yard mark, Ms. Hayes approached her, her voice low and urgent. "Ms. Vance, you should know that Mr. Thorne holds the club record at this distance. No one has beaten his score in 5 years." Elara nodded, appreciating the warning. "Thank you for your concern, Miss Hayes, but I'll be fine." Julian, meanwhile, was making a show of the event. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced to the substantial crowd, "we are about to witness either the most impressive fluke in shooting history or the most embarrassing failure. 3 bullseyes at 75 yards with a standard handgun. Impossible for an amateur." Elara loaded fresh magazines methodically. As she prepared, memories of Marcus's lessons filtered through her mind. "When the pressure is on," he had told her, his voice a calm anchor in her memory, "fall back on your training. Let your body remember what your mind might forget under stress." The range had gone completely silent, all attention focused on the confrontation unfolding. For the first shot, Elara took slightly longer to aim, adjusting to the increased distance. The crack of the gun was followed by another perfect hit. Julian's jaw tightened visibly. The second shot came more quickly, Elara adjusting her stance minutely before firing. Another bullseye. Before taking the third shot, Elara twisted her wedding ring once, feeling Marcus's presence as strongly as if he were standing beside her, a silent encouragement. The final shot split the air and hit dead center. Again. Julian's face had drained of color, his expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and raw fury. Ms. Hayes returned with the 3 targets, displaying them for verification. There was no question. 3 perfect shots at a distance that would challenge even experienced marksmen. "Congratulations, Ms. Vance," Ms. Hayes said, unable to keep the profound admiration from her voice. "That was truly remarkable." Julian snatched the targets, examining them with increasing desperation. "This is impossible," he hissed, his voice low and venomous. "No one just walks in off the street and shoots like this. She must have rigged something." Elara remained calm, though a sliver of steel entered her voice. "I believe we had an agreement, Mr. Thorne." "Agreement? With a cheater?" Julian's voice rose, cracking under the strain. "I'm not paying $50,000 based on some trick," Ms. Hayes intervened, her tone firm. "Mr. Thorne, Ms. Vance's performance was witnessed by dozens of members, including Senator Ashton. The shots were legitimate." Julian rounded on her, his finger jabbing the air inches from her face. "Know your place, Evelyn. One word from me to the board, and you're finished here." The threat silenced Ms. Hayes, but her expression hardened with resolve. Elara watched the exchange with quiet intensity. "If you're accusing me of cheating," she said evenly, "perhaps we should move this discussion to a more private setting." Julian, misinterpreting her intent, scoffed. "Private? So you can avoid the consequences? No, let's settle this right here." He turned to the crowd, his voice ringing with renewed arrogance. "Ladies and gentlemen, I propose a real challenge. 1 week from today, a formal competition. Me versus our mystery sharpshooter. 10 stations, varying distances, with club-provided equipment to ensure everything's fair. Elara realized she had unintentionally stepped into something much larger than a simple challenge. Part of her, the part that craved anonymity, wanted to retreat. But a stronger part, the part forged by Marcus's love and her own quiet resilience, knew she couldn't back down now. "I accept," she said quietly. "Same terms. If I win, $50,000 to the Wounded Warriors Project." Julian's smile didn't reach his eyes, which glittered with a cold light. "Deal. And when I win, you publicly explain whatever trick you used today." As the crowd began to disperse, Ms. Hayes approached Elara again. "That was either very brave or very foolish," she said, a wry smile touching her lips. "Julian Thorne doesn't lose gracefully, and he has considerable influence here." Elara nodded, the adrenaline beginning to fade, leaving her feeling drained but strangely resolute. "I didn't come here looking for trouble. I just wanted to practice." Ms. Hayes studied her thoughtfully. "Yet you shot like a seasoned professional. Who are you really, Elara Vance?" Elara gathered her few belongings. "Just someone keeping a promise," she replied, her voice barely audible. What neither Elara nor anyone else in the club knew was that Julian Thorne was already making a phone call, his voice tight with a mixture of anger and a dawning, unsettling fear. "Find out everything there is to know about Elara Vance," he instructed his personal assistant, "no matter what it takes." Because Julian had recognized something in Elara's shooting that the others had missed, the distinctive, economical technique of elite military training executed with a chilling precision that couldn't possibly be faked. News of the Phantom Shooter, as Elara was quickly dubbed, and her improbable duel with Julian Thorne spread like wildfire through Boston's elite circles and beyond. Julian, besieged by calls and consumed by a bruised ego, found his investigators' initial reports on Elara Vance. 33, quiet accountant, no discernible shooting history, utterly maddening. "Dig deeper," he raged. "Virginia Beach, where she lived before Boston. Her husband." Elara, meanwhile, tried to maintain a semblance of normalcy, though the sudden, unwelcome spotlight was jarring. Ms. Hayes called with a quiet warning. "Julian's having you investigated. He's desperate." Elara thanked her, a weary sigh escaping her. In the quiet of her small apartment, she found solace in Marcus's old logbook, his neat script detailing their practice sessions, his proud notes on her natural talent. The next day she called in sick to work, a first, and spent hours at a remote public range, Marcus's voice a guiding presence as she methodically honed her skills. Mac, Marcus's loyal teammate, finally tracked her down, his gruff concern a balm. "The whole community's buzzing, Elara. Marcus, he'd be so damn proud, not just of the shooting, but of you, stepping back into the world." Tears, unexpected and sharp, pricked Elara's eyes. "This wasn't what I planned, Mac." "The best battles rarely are," he said gently. "But sometimes they're exactly what we need. Just be careful with Thorne. Guys like that don't take losing well." Then came the breakthrough Julian craved. His investigator called, voice hushed with revelation. "Virginia Beach was the key, Mr. Thorne. Elara Vance is the widow of Captain Marcus Vance, U.S. Navy SEAL. Killed in action 3 years ago. Highly decorated sniper. According to my sources, they called him the Phantom. He trained his wife personally. Military buddies thought it a hobby, but he took it seriously. One contact remembered him saying she had exceptional raw potential. A chill snaked down Julian's spine. A SEAL sniper's widow, the protege of a legend. The narrative he'd constructed of exposing an amateur's lucky streak crumbled, replaced by something far more potent, far more dangerous to his carefully curated image. Oblivious to this discovery, Elara received another update from Ms. Hayes. Julian's pushed through another rule change for the competition. The final station, a custom Macmillan TAC-50 long-range precision rifle, his absolute specialty, very few in civilian hands, will now be weighted to count for 30% of the total score. Elara understood immediately. If Julian suspected her connection to Marcus, this was his strategic counter, designed to exploit any gap in her training. She knew what she had to do. Through Mac's extensive network within the Special Operations community, a meeting was discreetly arranged. At a specialized range outside the city, Elara was met by Commander Rexford "Rex" Cole, a stern-faced man whose eyes held the unmistakable look of someone who had seen too much. "Mrs. Vance," he said, his voice resonant, "I served with Marcus. Heard you might appreciate some pointers on the Macmillan platform. He taught you well with handguns. This is just magnified. Trust what you know." For 4 intensive hours, Commander Cole guided Elara through the intricate nuances of the high-powered rifle. "You have his patience, his breathing control," he observed as her shots grew increasingly accurate. As they packed up, he handed her a small, worn notebook. Marcus's distance calculations and wind adjustment formulas. He developed them himself. Might come in handy. "Commander, thank you," Elara said, deeply moved. "But why are you doing all this?" Rex Cole's expression softened almost imperceptibly. "When you lose a brother in the teams, you look after what mattered to him. Nathan, Marcus talked about you, how proud he was of your progress, your natural ability. Said you had the calmest hands he'd ever seen on a civilian." Julian, now armed with the full knowledge of Elara's connection to the legendary Phantom, felt a sliver of unease but pushed it down, cloaking it in arrogance. "Experience always wins over sentiment," he assured his increasingly worried girlfriend Isabel. "And besides," he added with a chilling smile, after a brief, furtive phone call, "I've arranged for a little insurance policy, just to ensure a level playing field, my dear." Competition day dawned electric. The Sterling Shooters Club, open to the public and swarming with press, buzzed with an unprecedented fervor. Ms. Hayes, ever vigilant, managed to slip Elara a quiet warning. "I've checked the equipment. There are irregularities. Subtle, nothing I can officially flag, but enough to significantly advantage someone intimately familiar with these specific firearms." Elara, dressed simply in jeans and a navy button-down, carrying only Marcus's small notebook, nodded her understanding. Julian, surrounded by his entourage and sponsors, approached Elara, his smile a predatory slash. "Ms. Vance. Or perhaps, given what I've learned, I should say Mrs. Vance. The Phantom's widow. The pressure can be overwhelming for those unaccustomed to the spotlight, you know. No shame in withdrawing." Elara met his gaze, her own steady and unyielding. "My husband taught me a great deal about performing under pressure, Mr. Thorne." In the packed spectator stands, she noticed a distinct group of men, their bearing unmistakable, military. Mac was among them. His subtle, encouraging nod bolstered her resolve. The early stations were a showcase of contrasting styles. Julian, all flash and flawless technique with the competition-style firearms he knew so well. Elara, quieter, more economical in her movements, demonstrating an unnerving consistency across all platforms, particularly the military-grade weapons. At the 5th station she encountered the first clear instance of tampering. The trigger pull on the Sig Sauer was subtly, yet significantly, heavier than standard. Recalling Marcus's calm words, "Equipment fails, conditions change." Adapt and overcome, she adjusted her stance, her grip, and matched Julian's score, despite the handicap. As the competition progressed, a pattern emerged. The gap between them narrowed, then vanished. Before the 9th station, with the scores dead even, Julian leaned in close, his voice a venomous whisper meant only for her. Impressive performance, Mrs. Vance. Your husband would be proud. The Phantom's techniques are quite distinctive, you know. I did my homework. Elara's hand stilled momentarily at the deliberate, cruel use of Marcus's call sign, but her expression remained controlled. Then you also know he valued integrity above all else, Mr. Thorne. The competition would be decided entirely by the final, most challenging station, the Macmillan TAC-50 at an exceptional distance. As Elara approached the rifle, she immediately noticed the subtle, almost undetectable adjustments to the scope and stock. Julian's insurance. Rather than protesting, she calmly opened Marcus's notebook, her fingers tracing his familiar handwriting, finding his precise formulas for compensating for just such equipment variations. Julian completed his sequence first, placing 9 of his 10 shots within the innermost rings, a formidable score, setting a benchmark that would require near perfection from Elara. "Not everyone is built for championship pressure," he remarked, loud enough for the nearby microphones and spectators to hear, his smirk firmly in place. Taking her position behind the rifle, Elara felt a peculiar, profound calmness descend, the same focused, almost transcendent state Marcus had described from his most critical missions. She meticulously made her adjustments based on his formulas, compensating for the subtle sabotage with techniques born of combat-tested experience. Her first shots hit with perfect, unwavering precision. By the 6th, all were bullseyes. The audience leaned forward, a collective hush falling over the range. As she prepared for her final decisive shot, a sharp, unexpected reflection of light flashed across her sightline. A momentary, deliberate distraction orchestrated by someone near Julian's entourage. Elara paused, her breath catching for a fraction of a second. Then, with absolute, unbreakable control, she refocused, exhaled, and sent the final round downrange, a 10th consecutive bullseye, surpassing Julian's performance. The crowd erupted. A spontaneous, thunderous wave of applause washed over Elara, transforming into a sustained standing ovation. Final results: Elara Vance, 1st place. Julian Thorne, 2nd place, Ms. Hayes announced, her voice ringing with official triumph. Julian's carefully constructed mask of sportsmanship slipped, then shattered, revealing raw, unadulterated fury. He offered a perfunctory, bone-crushing handshake. "This isn't over," he hissed. Elara replied calmly, her voice clear despite the din. "For today, Mr. Thorne, it is, and I believe you owe $50,000 to the Wounded Warriors Project." Julian's facade crumbled completely. "You think this proves anything?" he raged, his voice carrying throughout the now silent room. "That a military widow with beginner's luck can replace years of championship experience? This was nothing but a publicity stunt. The equipment was rigged." "The equipment was indeed rigged, Mr. Thorne," Ms. Hayes cut in, her voice sharp and clear. She held up her tablet, displaying crystal-clear security footage of Julian's own technical advisor brazenly tampering with the competition firearms before the match. But not in Ms. Vance's favor. The club's security system records all access to the equipment room. The revelation sent a shockwave through the audience, transforming their admiration for Elara's incredible performance into a deeper, more profound respect. Excellence, achieved not just under pressure, but in the face of deliberate, malicious sabotage. Julian Thorne stood frozen, the blood draining from his face, as he registered not only the humiliating loss of the competition, but the imminent, catastrophic destruction of his reputation and career. The story of the unassuming widow who toppled the arrogant champion, not with luck, but with skill, integrity, and the quiet strength of a promise kept, exploded across news outlets and social media. Elara, overwhelmed by the sudden deluge of attention, made only one call: to Mac. It's gotten so much bigger than I ever expected, Mac. What do I do now? That depends entirely on what you want, Elara, Mac replied, his voice gentle. Privacy or justice? Elara considered this briefly, then her resolve firmed. Justice. He cheated. The equipment tampering was fraud, and he still hasn't paid the donation. At the Thorne family penthouse, Julian's crisis management team was strategizing damage control. We issue a statement, his publicist advised. Cite extreme pressure, acknowledge a lapse in judgment, announce a substantial donation to veterans' causes, perhaps check into a wellness center. Julian, still reeling, stubbornly refused. I'm not apologizing for anything. That woman had elite military training. That's the real unfair advantage. Their heated session was abruptly interrupted by the arrival of Boston police officers. Mr. Julian Thorne, the detective stated calmly, we need you to come with us to answer some questions regarding allegations of fraud and criminal tampering. We're investigating potential violations of Massachusetts gaming laws, particularly since the event involved a substantial wager. Meanwhile, Elara met with Colonel Grant Sterling, the distinguished director of the Wounded Warriors Project. Several of our board members are also members of the Sterling Shooters Club, Mrs. Vance, the colonel informed her. They've already initiated proceedings to revoke Mr. Thorne's championship records and suspend his membership indefinitely. He then paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. Our foundation has been developing a specialized marksmanship training program for veterans struggling with reintegration. The therapeutic aspects of shooting sports, the focus and discipline required, have shown incredibly promising results. We would be deeply honored if you would consider taking a leading role in this initiative. 3 days later, Elara reviewed the settlement offer from Julian Thorne's legal team, a $100,000 donation to the Wounded Warriors Project, double the original wager, a full public apology, and a request for a private meeting before any public statements were made. That meeting took place in a neutral conference room. Julian Thorne entered with his attorney, his usual arrogant swagger conspicuously diminished. His designer attire was replaced by a conservative business suit. He looked tired and years older. Mrs. Vance, he began, his voice subdued, I want to apologize. For my conduct, for my accusations, for everything. The truth is, I've built my entire identity around being the best, the champion. When you threatened that, I reacted poorly, criminally. His rehearsed statement seemed to give way to something more genuine, a flicker of reluctant self-awareness in his eyes. I've never faced someone who shoots for reasons beyond trophies or recognition. It was unsettling. Elara considered his words, her gaze unwavering. Mr. Thorne, I didn't enter that competition seeking to unsettle anyone. I was simply keeping a promise to my husband. Your actions undermined the integrity of a sport you claimed to respect, and they dishonored the charity you agreed to support. Julian nodded, a flush of genuine shame crossing his features. I understand that now. That's why I've increased the donation, and I've accepted the 3-year suspension from all competitive shooting. The settlement was signed. As they prepared to leave, Julian extended his hand. For what it's worth, Mrs. Vance, you're the finest, most principled shooter I've ever had the misfortune to compete against. Your husband taught you exceptionally well. Elara accepted the handshake, her grip firm. He would say that the right teacher simply helps us discover what's already there. 2 weeks later, Elara Vance stood in the newly established, state-of-the-art training range at the Veterans Support Foundation's Rehabilitation Center, a facility funded in large part by Julian Thorne's compelled donation and subsequent contributions from grateful manufacturers. Her first class consisted of 6 veterans, men and women carrying both visible and invisible wounds from their service to the country. Good morning, she began, her voice stronger, more confident than it had been in years. My name is Elara Vance. I'm not a soldier, and I'm not a champion. I'm just someone who learned that sometimes the steadiest hands belong to those who have endured the greatest shaking. Today, we begin with the fundamentals: how to stand, how to breathe, how to focus. 6 months later, at the Foundation's annual fundraising gala, Elara addressed the assembled guests. 1 year ago, she said, her voice resonating with quiet conviction, I walked into a shooting range for the first time in 3 long years, simply to keep a promise to my late husband. I expected to reconnect with a skill he had taught me, and then return to my quiet, unassuming life. Instead, I found myself in a confrontation that, unexpectedly, led to this incredible program and to the community we are building together here tonight. Later that evening, when the Foundation announced the establishment of the annual Captain Marcus Phantom Vance Excellence in Marksmanship Scholarship for veterans pursuing careers in shooting instruction and therapy, Elara felt tears well in her eyes. As the first recipient, a former Army Ranger who had overcome significant combat injuries accepted the honor with quiet dignity. Elara twisted her wedding ring, a small, unconscious gesture. This one's for you, Marcus, she thought, a gentle smile gracing her lips. For everything you taught me about standing my ground and finding my mark. Perhaps Elara Vance's greatest victory wasn't defeating an arrogant champion who had underestimated her, but in finding her own way back to the world, rebuilding a life that honored both a cherished past and a purposeful future. For those who had watched her remarkable journey from being ignored and dismissed at the Sterling Shooters Club to confidently leading the Foundation's vital programs, the lesson was clear and deeply resonant. Never ever underestimate the quiet ones. Behind their silence often lies a steely determination forged through unimaginable adversity, skills honed through unwavering dedication, and values anchored in experiences far beyond ordinary understanding. And if you ever find yourself dismissed, overlooked, or made to feel invisible, remember Elara Vance's journey, from unseen to essential. Remember how a woman, once ignored at an elite shooting range, transformed a single moment of disrespect into a powerful movement of respect, one perfect, purposeful shot at a time. And that's the powerful story of Elara Vance. What did you think of her incredible journey from overlooked to champion? Were you on the edge of your seat during her showdown with Julian? What was the most satisfying moment for you? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading them. If you were inspired by Elara's strength and want more captivating stories where the underdog rises and justice is served, please hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Host.